Okay, so we will be starting off today's show the same way we start every Tuesday edition of the Zach Kroll Sports Podcast, and that is with my 10 main takeaways of the week. So without further ado, boys, hit the music. Here we go. Takeaway number 1. Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, they both need to go. And I totally understand that's a little bit of a random team for me to be starting with on this segment today, because the Chicago Bears, they did lose to the Detroit Lions, and I'm not just saying this because they've lost. It's just watching the Chicago Bears over the last couple weeks, it's making it more and more difficult for me to defend Matt Nagy. And I feel like if you're a Chicago Bear fan, you have every right in the world to be absolutely frustrated by how bad this offense is right now. Because here's the problem. Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace were the two people that decided to bring in Nick Foles because they knew he's had success under John DeFilippo and his scheme before. And as time went on, Foles got worse and worse. Mitchell Trubisky, I understand it's not Matt Nagy's fault that he fumbled deep in his own territory, and that's ultimately how the Detroit Lions ended up winning the game. But the bottom line is this. The Chicago Bears, during Matt Nagy's first year, had an unbelievable season, and they deserve so much credit for the way they went to the playoffs, and if their kicker doesn't miss a chip shot field goal, then they win, and maybe they win another game, who knows. But at the same time, I do think when you look at the Chicago Bears team, this year they need to be better. They started off 5-1 and are still not even going to sniff the playoffs. And let's not forget, their GM is the one who drafted Mitchell Trubisky over Pat Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. If I'm a Bears fan, I want Nagy and Pace and Trubisky and Foles all out. Takeaway number 2. The more time goes by, the harder it gets for me to defend Carson Wentz. And it's unfortunate because it's not like the Philadelphia Eagles made this big mistake when they decided to give him all of that money. There was a time not too long ago in a pre-Patrick Mahomes era that if you asked any football fan, if you were to build your team around one player, who would it be and why? The answer would have been Carson Wentz. And that was the answer to that question maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And I think he played well last year. I think he didn't play that badly this year up until really that Brown game. Once that Brown game hit, it kind of just made more and more sense to me. Like, I'm sorry, but this is just not getting the job done. And I'm not even saying that it's all on him. I think Doug Peterson has done an awful job this season. The Eagles have the argument to me as one of the most disappointing teams in the NFL. And Doug Peterson decided that Jalen Hurts is going to start at quarterback this weekend. And to be honest, we'll see how it goes. Hurts did look okay against the Green Bay Packers. And in this instance, I'm not necessarily sure if Doug Peterson had a choice. Just because watching that Packer game, those Eagles just looked defeated. You kind of just knew the whole way that they didn't really have a shot. And Carson Wentz was not able to get the job done. And coincidence or not, the Eagles did get a little bit of a spark once Jalen Hurts got in there. Jalen Reagor had the return touchdown. But the problem is this. There are so many different problems with this Philadelphia Eagle team between the fact that they're not healthy, the coaching, the general manager, and his inability to draft wide receivers. Taking J.J. Arcega-Whiteside over DK Metcalf has been a conversation in Philly that's been going on for a while now. And very quickly, everything's starting to fall apart for the Eagles. They made, I guess, the right call going with Jalen Hurts, but I don't think it's going to fix anything anytime soon. They have too many problems. Takeaway number 3. Anyone who says the New York Jets were actually trying to tank doesn't know what they're talking about, because literally the next day, Greg Williams got fired, and odds are, I don't think he's getting another job in the NFL as a defensive coordinator ever again. Because the fact that his defense dialed up that cover zero nonsense on a 4th down play where literally all you have to do is keep the Raiders from scoring. Just play prevent. Do whatever you can to keep these Raiders out of the end zone. And of course, Lamar Jackson gets burned by Henry Ruggs one-on-one coverage, and the Raiders end up winning the ballgame. Now, I understand why Jet fans are happy, because they want the number 1 pick. And to be honest, I want that number 1 pick. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be absurdly good in the NFL. But at the same time, it's just tough seeing your team lose like that. I don't want to see my team go 0-16. Ideally, I would rather have the Jaguars win a game, which we thought they might have on Sunday against the Minnesota Vikings. And if the Jets would have beaten the Raiders, then they would have held on to that number one pick. But it's unfortunate. Greg Williams ends up losing his job, and it's a big win for the Raiders because even with that win right now, they are on the outside looking in the AFC playoffs, but they have a lot of things to work on. And right now, even though they got the win, I do feel like most football fans right now share the pretty similar opinion of, okay, the Raiders were lucky to win that game, and they need to play better if they want to be a really good team in the AFC, because that Falcon game was a red flag, and a lot of people were kind of worried about this after the Chief game. The Raiders didn't beat the Chiefs. You know, they showed up. It was a good game. It was competitive. But then the last two games, they really have not played well. And if they want to make any kind of run, they need to be better. Takeaway number 4. Anthony Lynn, man. This guy is on this segment every single week. But I think this one could just take the cake. So, last week, the Los Angeles Chargers lose to the Buffalo Bills. And when you watch the game, Justin Herbert didn't play well. But the game, it's not like the game was impossible to win. Plus, the Chargers, they had a chance, but they didn't come out ready to play. And there's nothing worse for me than a coach that doesn't have his team ready to play. And then after the game, Anthony Lynn apparently tells his players, odds are we're not making the playoffs? What? Even if that's true, what are you doing? You're a head coach that's literally on the hot seat right now. Do you want to lose your job? Because if you tell your players that, what's going to happen? They're not going to be playing for you. They're not going to want to play for you. And then what happens on Sunday? The Patriots come into your crib and give you the absolute beats. And I understand everyone's going to say, Bill Belichick against a young quarterback. He beat Kyler Murray last week. He's a mastermind. And I get it. Bill Belichick is the GOAT when it comes to head coaches. But at the same time, my God, if you're a Charger fan, I would want that guy out as soon as possible. That was an embarrassing effort by the Los Angeles Chargers on Sunday, and Justin Herbert deserves better because the play calling has not been good at all. We saw the replay footage in that game against the Buffalo Bills where Anthony Lynn has his offensive line pass protecting, and then he has Justin Herbert running a QB sneak. What? If I was a Charger fan, I would really not be happy with the direction of this team under Anthony Lynn, and I would want a new head coach as soon as possible because it is clear that this Anthony Lynn era is not working out, and the last 2 years have been super disappointing. Takeaway number 5. Props to the New York Giants. I told you a month ago that these New York Giants were going to be the 2020 version of the 2019 Miami Dolphins, a team that early in the season was really struggling to win games. We didn't necessarily know how good their coach was, given the fact that Belichick's assistants usually do not succeed in the NFL. And then Joe Judge and his squad gets off to an 0-5 start. But here's the thing. During that 0-5 start, if you watch those games, the Giants were competitive. And they showed some flashes just in every game but the 49er game at home where they got blown out. They've been competitive in each and every one of their games. And on Sunday, it came to fruition. They won their 4th game in a row. And for the first time in a while, it really felt to me like, holy crap, the New York Giants actually won a big-time football game. And we're going to get to this game a little bit later in the show in more detail. But you saw that defense just flustered Russell Wilson. I've never really seen anything like it. He didn't know what to do. And if you're a Giant fan, the bottom line is this. You know that with no Saquon Barkley in the lineup, your offense is very rarely going to be, all of a sudden, the main reason why you win football games. But now, on Sunday, the Giants' defense proved that they could go on the road in a super tough environment and get the job done. And they deserve a lot of credit for that, the way they were able to battle, the way they were able to play, and Joe Judge just deserves so much props. He's been able to get the job done, and I'm very curious to see how this Giant team does in the NFC East going forward. Because we all know, even though in the beginning of the season, the NFC East was considered a laughingstock, all of a sudden, it's not too bad after the way the Giants and the Washington football team have played. Takeaway number 6. I'll admit, I was wrong on Josh Allen. The way he played last night made me look foolish. And he played like an elite quarterback last night against a really good, although banged up, San Francisco 49ers defense. The Buffalo Bills, as much as I hate on them, I'll admit, they're a really well-run organization. What Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane have been able to do in the short time since they've gotten to Buffalo has been unbelievable. Because think about it. Before McDermott got there, the Buffalo Bills had this long streak of not making the playoffs. Remember when Rex Ryan was the coach of the Bills? Seems like a long time ago. But since Sean McDermott has gotten to Buffalo, he's done an excellent job putting all of his players in the best position to succeed as possible. And that continued when we watched the Bills on Monday Night Football against the San Francisco 49ers. Because the Bills offensive coordinator, Brian Daboll, could have literally gotten himself an offensive coordinator's job just based on that performance on Monday Night Football. He had Josh Allen picking apart that 49ers defense. And of course, Josh Allen deserves credit. He played great. Stephon Diggs, bringing him in has been a great move because it really has proven that bringing in a wide receiver like that has really helped Josh Allen and his development. And they have a run game. Singletary played pretty well last night. Their defense is getting better. The way the Steelers played on Sunday, and we're going to get to them soon, the Buffalo Bills right now may have an argument as the second best team in the AFC. And the good news is they played to each other on Sunday Night Football, Pittsburgh and Buffalo. That is a huge game. No other words need to be said. That is a huge game, and I'm really looking forward to see how it goes. Props to Josh Allen and the Bills. Takeaway number 7. The New Orleans Saints are legitimately good, but I'm curious to see how exactly they look when Drew Brees comes back. And I'm going to be very curious to see what happens when the Saints play the Chiefs in a couple weeks and Drew Brees is back under center. Because here's the thing about Taysom Hill. I think Sean Payton has done a nice job developing offense for him, and he played really well on Sunday against the Atlanta Falcons. But here's the only thing. Taysom Hill has been a guy that all of a sudden now has gotten used to this role. I think his teammates also have gotten used to him in this role. But now you go back to a pure pocket passer in Drew Brees, and my only issue is that when you look at Drew Brees and the way he has been playing over so far this season, his arm is not very strong. And when you get into shootouts with Seattle, even if you get into a shootout with the Rams, which is very possible, you could get into a shootout with Tampa Bay or Green Bay, you are going to need that quarterback to step up and get the job done. And in terms of throwing the ball deep, I'm not necessarily sure if Drew Brees could do that. Also, the Saints, let's face it, have had a lot of problems winning the last couple of years in the playoffs. They haven't been able to get through. And I understand against the Los Angeles Rams, they got screwed by the referees. You could talk about it all you want. But at the same time, that was just a super disappointing effort. And the game went to overtime. They could have won anyways. And then last year, they got beat by Kirk Cousins at home in a playoff game. That just can't happen if you want to be an elite football team. And they've been really good so far. They've been proving me wrong. If you have been listening to the show, I picked the New Orleans Saints to miss the playoffs, but they've proven me wrong. And right now, I could say they are the best team in the NFC, but if I were to predict a team out of the NFC to make the Super Bowl, I'll tell you now, it wouldn't be them. I don't trust Drew Brees throwing the ball deep down the field. Takeaway number 8. Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns are a playoff team and maybe a legitimate contender, because the way Baker Mayfield came out on Sunday afternoon against the Tennessee Titans was unreal. That was Oklahoma Baker Mayfield. That was the best game that Baker Mayfield has played so far in his NFL career. And he deserves a lot of credit because that was a phenomenal performance against Tennessee. He threw 4 touchdowns in the first half, and I'm happy for the Browns because rightfully so, there were many people who were going around saying the Cleveland Browns, even though their record is 8-3, I don't necessarily know if we could take them seriously just because they haven't beaten anyone legitimately good. And it's not like we were penalizing them for the schedule they had. They just couldn't really beat anyone good because the only two teams they played that were good were Pittsburgh and Baltimore, and ultimately they got crushed. But I do think Kevin Stefanski has proven so far this season that he is one of the better coaches in the league, and that hire for the Cleveland Browns has worked out very well. And look, Cleveland Brown fans deserve to be excited. This is the first time their team has been in this position since 2002, a position to make the playoffs, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. And this is without Odell Beckham, by the way. Baker Mayfield played really well in the first half, fine in the second half, tried to lean on that running game a bit, and I feel like if the Browns really needed him to throw for 500 yards, he could have, because that's how locked in he was. I'm curious to see what exactly the Browns' schedule will treat them for the rest of the season. Next week, they will take on the Baltimore Ravens on Monday Night Football, a team that beat them up earlier in the season, and we'll see what Baltimore looks like tonight against Dallas. But I'm a fan of Cleveland. They deserve a lot of credit. Takeaway number 9. I mentioned the Giants being good in the NFC East. How about the Washington football team? And we're going to get to the Steelers and everything this game means for them later in the show, but I just wanted to focus on Washington for a bit. I mean, look, going on the road to Dallas and winning, going on the road to Pittsburgh and winning, and the way they did yesterday when they were down 14-3 going into the second half and outscored the Steelers 20-3 without Antonio Gibson, a guy that looks like to be one of the best running backs in the league that's emerging. Super impressive job by the Washington football team. And I think when you look at this team, their defense is really good. We knew that, but their offense slowly has been improving. I mean, this kid Cam Sims, how many big plays did he make? You also look at Terry McLaurin. He is a stud, and he didn't even have that good of a game yesterday. He had 2 catches for 14 yards, and still the WFT was able to get the job done. You got to feel great about Alex Smith and the way his story has gone over the last couple of years. He really deserves this. And the Washington football team and the Giants have a legitimate head-to-head race at the top of the NFC East. And I'm going to be very curious to see how that goes on going forward, because both teams have the same record right now. Both teams have semi-difficult schedules. The Washington football team goes to Arizona next week to take on the 49ers. I'll tell you what, if the football team wins that game, then I'm sold. If they can win their 3rd road game in a row, then I would be sold. And what they did yesterday was really impressive. But the Giants are really good right now, too. The Giants also had the head-to-head tiebreaker over Washington, so I'm not necessarily going to trust Washington to win the division until I see the Giants get knocked off. But at the same time, they deserve a lot of credit for going into Pittsburgh, and their defense is legitimately good, plus their coach is legitimately good. And then takeaway number 10. Speaking of teams that are legitimately good, the Los Angeles Rams. Remember last week how America was ready to hop off their bandwagon after they lost a close game at home to the San Francisco 49ers? Well, I'll say this. The Rams, yeah, they still had the best defense in the NFC. Not really that close. Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, this kid Troy Hill had that pick 6 on Kyler Murray. That was phenomenal. And the Rams right now are in first place in the NFC West. Now, they still have to go to Seattle. That game might be for the division, but they did make up a game on Seattle this week with the Hawks losing to the Giants, and good for the Rams. They were able to take advantage of, let's face it, an Arizona Cardinal team that, oh yeah, I told you on this show about a month ago that they are 1 year away. And right now, when you look at the Arizona Cardinals, you got to be pretty worried because they're in serious jeopardy of missing the playoffs, and that's after that Hail Mary. And as impressive as that Hail Mary was, let's be honest, right? The Bills should have won that game, and the Cardinals, if they would have dropped that game, would have been another game back. The Cardinals had to go 1-1 at New England, home Rams. The fact that they went 0-2 in that stretch kind of shows me, along with the loss to Seattle, that once again, they're a year away. And right now, the Cardinals go to New York next week to take on the Giants. Are we sure the Cardinals are winning that game? Because obviously it's not Thursday. My picks will come out then. I am right now thinking that the New York Giants are a better football team than the Arizona Cardinals. And that's just facts. The Arizona Cardinals were not good on Sunday. Kyler threw that poor pick six, and every time the Cardinals offense looked like they were getting back into the game, their defense would let the Rams drive the ball right down the field and score. So props to the Rams, but the Cardinals are not very good right now.